Today we're on Mind Behind Music, and we're joined by legendary Wolf Marshall, a guitarist, educator, and author whose work has shaped how generations learn and understand music. Wolf is widely known for his authentic transcriptions and guitar methods published by Hal Leonard, as well as standout contributions to Guitar World, Guitar for the Practicing Musician, and Guitar Player magazines. His passion for accuracy and musical depth has helped us bring playing icons like Hendrix, Clapton, and Wes Montgomery to life on the page. From performing with legends like B.B. King and Burt Bacharach to teaching jazz guitar at UCLA, Wolf's career spans both stage and classroom, and we're honored to explore the mind behind it all today. Welcome, Wolf. Thank you for joining me. I sincerely appreciate it. How you doing?
Thank you. The pleasure is mine, John. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, awesome. So let's start with your early origins, all right?
Okay.
So your mother was a classical pianist.
Right.
You began studying violin, cello, and piano before switching to guitar at 14.
That's right.
How did that early classical background shape your musical vision?
It was ear training that I mostly got from it. When I was very young, my mom used to babysit me while she practiced in the apartment we had in New York City. And she would put me on a blanket comforter type of deal underneath her grand piano that was in her living room and would practice her pieces. And I would hear her play very complicated Chopin nocturnes, revolutionary etude, complicated Beethoven sonatas, Debussy pieces, Bach, and Mozart. And she would play those things. And once in a while, she'd flub a note here and there, and I'd hear her correct it. So I learned when the melody goes with the scale of the tonality, and I could, oh, that's a clinker. Okay, that one is in, and she corrected it. So I heard right away, version 1, version 2, version 1, just before I could even speak. Because I got that the minute I came home from the hospital.
That's awesome. So you began transcribing solos by ear at 14. Self-published guitar books by the early 70s.
Well, wait, let me correct that one thing. I had things published in the 70s, but they weren't self-published books.
Okay.
Those didn't happen until the early 80s with Starlix.
Okay.
The others were a work for hire. I did a Pat Martino solo in Downbeat. I did a piece in Guitar Player. And what else did I do? I think I did maybe something else in and no, that might have been it for the 70s, now that I think about it. Because in the 70s, I was touring, so I was very busy in that period where I would have been transcribing and publishing.
So what really sparked that early drive? How do you evolve into the prolific author that you're well known for?
The publishing aspect is different than the actual formation of the musical experience of transcribing. The musical experience of transcribing started very, very young on the guitar when I first got it, and it was a process of teaching myself because we didn't have a guitarist in the family. We had 2 violinists, and we had my classical mom, a pianist, and then we had basically classical music and no pop music at all. So I learned pop music, which would be rock and roll, from the radio. R&B. I learned songs from Lloyd Price. I learned simple 12-bar blues, R&B tunes, Green Onions, stuff like that. The first official guitar tune I taught myself was Link Wray's Rumble. Just learned the chords out of a book and said, that sounds like an E, that sounds like a D, that sounds like an A, and through trial and error, you piece a thing together, and little did I know I was starting to bond with the guitar as a transcribing medium.
Oh, that's awesome. When you're transcribing something like, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but, something like Ingve, so with your classical background, that probably came a lot easier to you than most people because you could hear the scale, right?
Early on, I realized scales are not where it's at. It's melodies. Melodies and harmony is really it. Scale is a container where all the available pitches live. It's a jigsaw puzzle that hasn't been assembled. All the pieces are in a box, but nothing is happening yet. You can play it up and down, of course, and get good technique, but it doesn't mean anything until you make it into a melody.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with
I discovered that with the blues, because the blues has a very simple scale And learning a pentatonic scale is not going to make you sound like B.B. King.
When you're transcribing, how do you approach that? You obviously have a foundation in music theory.
I didn't know any theory when I first transcribed. I knew how to read music on the piano, but I was so developed with my ear that when my mom would teach me piano, I was already doing it by ear. I watched her play and I saw where her hands went, and she'd be looking at the music, and I would look at the music and kind of fumble around, and then I'd stop reading. I'd memorized it.
It's awesome.
By ear. And so that was because I had trained my ear at an early age just to hear pitch discernment, to hear pitch perception, to hear the relation of pitch in order to develop a chord sound from the melody. How does a melody get harmonized? And that's really what it comes down to. The three aspects of music is melody, harmony, and rhythm. But that's an extension of how you color, more so than what it is in terms of its essence.
You would say obviously for transcribing, you have to have a good ear. But did you have any ear training other than just doing it on your own, or did you, like in college,
Oh yeah.
Intervals, minor second, major second, minor third.
Right.
So did you have any of that before you started transcribing, or?
No, not before, because I started transcribing at age 14.
Yeah.
I didn't go to college until age 20.
Okay. Which I'm sure helped, with.
Oh, I was transcribing Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton with Cream, Jeff Beck, Truth. What else? Mick Taylor with John Mayall. Those kind of souls. Peter Green. I was transcribing all that, plus Buddy Guy, B.B. King, Freddie King, Otis Rush, that stuff way before I ever had ear training in college.
Right. So, but
ear training in college was weird because you didn't have your instrument. You couldn't relate to your instrument. You're sitting there. You're basically doing what they call melodic dictation.
No.
And I had to learn how to do that because I am related to my instrument.
Yeah.
That's where I hear the music coming out of. Just to hear it as numbers in the air is a different story.
Yeah, learning the intervals by ear, which I would think definitely came into play with Beethoven once he went, deaf. That he obviously knew the intervals by ear. They have.
He heard the music in his head.
Yeah, they definitely, and there's ways of learning the intervals by associating it with different songs or sounds or whatever, but that's a skill in itself, and I remember having to do that too, which I enjoyed it, but trying to put the two together with your instrument and stuff like that is like to associate it together, takes some practice, but
transcribing is just the opposite of creating something and making it happen. This is something that's already happened, and you have to go reverse engineer it into a form of notation, or you just learn it as your own internal transcription, which I did in the beginning. I never wrote any of that stuff down prior to age 22, maybe.
Right. I was going to ask you that because if you didn't really have any education in music theory, then obviously you probably didn't know how to write music down.
No, I knew how to write music.
Oh, you did?
Because I could read music. That
pictures, everything.
I wrote music per se, a song that I would transcribe. I might write down a lick or something, but I didn't sit down and write full-on transcriptions that you're used to seeing in magazines. That was a process of development in the 70s.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of playing and transcribing experience totally by ear internalization and performing, knowing that when I heard it back, it was real, because I used to play those Eric Clapton solos on stage.
Yeah.
And the Jimi Hendrix stuff on stage.
I'm not sure because I'm not from that generation, but I would assume they didn't have transcriptions like we know it today. So basically everything that you learned was by ear.
Absolutely.
And, like Eddie Van Halen learning some of the Clapton stuff by ear, or Brad Gillis, talking about how he used to slow down the record player and just like, Did you ever do things like that?
My uncle was an electronics whiz, but he was also a collector of odd instruments. So one thing he got was an Ampex, a slow-mo, very speed turntable with a built-in speaker, which I still have. That's the first transcribing device I had. You could take a record, instead of slowing it down half speed, you could slow it down a third.
Now, you've transcribed and documented giants like Charlie Christian, Wes Montgomery, George Benson, and Pat Martino, Joe Pass, and more. How did you select these artists, and what criteria guided which solos or performances made the cut?
Well, those are really a matter of, by the time I was doing the jazz transcriptions, I had done probably 20 years of transcribing nothing but rock and pop music. I did 4 books on the Beatles. I did 1 on the Stones, Santana, Cream, Van Halen, Randy Rhoads. All that stuff came way before it. Michael Schenker, all of that stuff happened way before. So at a certain point, they just said, what would you like to do? And we were doing a series called Signature Licks, in which I would perform the licks, but there would also be transcription, so it had a matching CD. That was really a thing we started with Star Licks too.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
The cassette that came with the booklet, and you'd see, Jimmy Page style, or you'd see something along those lines, a progressive rock, and it would have a mix of, different Holdsworth and maybe Dimiola and maybe McLaughlin or whatever, these various phrases. Maybe Robin Ford would be in there.
Pat Martino was a major mentor who also hired you to write definitive transcriptions. What did working with Pat teach you philosophically, technically, spiritually?
Well, he taught me how the guitar works in jazz. I've often described that. He had a system by which two things that I related to. Very much like everything, he was very grounded in the blues. He started out in rock and roll too. If you look at early videos or pictures of him, maybe there's some whole movies or something, he was once in a rock band with Frankie Avalon and Bobby Rydell, and he was playing a Les Paul.
I can't picture Frankie Avalon being in the rock band, really.
Yeah, he played trumpet pretty well. Let me finish my Pat Martino thought. What he taught me was 2 very important things. First of all, something that later on I heard again from Herbie Hancock, and that is there are no bad notes, just bad connections. So you can play anything if you know what it goes to next. You could play the most egregious wrong note. And if you have a piece of language that is going to be addressed, that can be movement into that language line.
When that get into jazz, because jazz is so free moving, and
well, the kind of jazz we're talking about is jazz with actually very defined changes.
Okay.
So you're not going to play a really odd stuff unless you purposely want to sound like you're playing outside the parameters of the song. Most standard jazz to this day is still based on the Great American Songbook. I mean, there are offshoots where there's more fusion stuff, and there might be stuff that's more soul jazz, and there may even be other variations where it involves world music. But the point is, what we consider jazz, especially in those days when I got together with Pat, was still things that had chord changes. And those changes, you address them with a piece of music, just like playing a pentatonic scale and not doing a lick that B.B. King ever played. Just running the scale in some odd intervallic combination is not going to sound like the language of the blues.
That's true.
So if you want to prove to the language of the music, which I learned again from classical, you don't mess up Liszt or Chopin or Debussy. Start adding your own, permutations. If you do that, you're writing a new piece of music.
Yeah. So jazz, you're saying, has specific chord progressions that are followed.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
And Pat showed me, and through the transcriptions, I learned deeper going into his music, because he would oftentimes say, "Don't ask me that. You've already written it down. What do you need to ask me that for? Let's instead talk about philosophy. Let's instead talk about art. Let's talk about calligraphy." Those are the things that we actually spent a lot of time talking about. He said, if I said, what are the chords you use in the road song? You've already written it down. What do you need to ask me that for?
Transcribing music, it reminds me of like musical analysis, like what you would take in college or music school or whatever, where you analyze the piece of music. With all the people that you've transcribed, you probably, of all people, really have a profound understanding of each player's roots, and where they're coming
I'll
from.
try to.
I've seen it in like some of the transcriptions that you've done where you do an introduction and you'll talk about these things, with like Joe Satriani or maybe Ingve and things of that nature. So what this whole series is about is, getting to the mind behind the music. It's about creativity, it's about spirituality, and utilizing your knowledge in a way that becomes your own unique voice. When you are transcribing and you're analyzing these things, what have you learned over the years from transcribing so much? How has that influenced you as a musician yourself because of the understanding that you now have?
I would have a whole big book like this. I have already filled 3 of these up since 2011.
Wow.
And so this is anyway, it's all full of different transcriptions and stuff and things that come off the transcriptions. So for instance, here's one I did not too long ago. I'll show you this a little bit more closer up.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay, so if I bring it in, you'll see that it is Charlie Parker. And these are my actual personal notations.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Maybe this is easier to see. That's a better view, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a better view.
You notice over here is the analysis.
Okay.
Over here is the analysis.
All right.
Here is the actual transcription. This is Charlie Parker's solo that was never published. It's an outtake that was an alternate take he did of Donna Lee, which I have many of my students learn, and they would learn the solo in order to mine it for the language, not necessarily play it like a parrot, because I discourage that except in the initial phase of acquisition. In the process of internalization and assimilation, the whole idea is to take that music and start to make it your own with the final step of having it become innovation. So the 3 very important steps are acquisition, assimilation, innovation. Those are the 3 stages of what a transcription can do for you. If you that's playing only the transcription and treat it like a piece of classical music, in the words of Pat Martino told me once, music will do things for you, it'll do things to you. So what the problem is you're going to get stuck in that rut where you're just playing from a very narrow vision of what happened and the snapshot of the musical picture.
So the whole key is to learn from it to make it your own.
Absolutely. I have many, many pages afterwards where I, besides breaking it down for analysis and saying, okay, this is where Pat uses, or Bird in this case, uses a very clear hexatonic line. And now in the next one, bebop scale, got it. Melodic minor, yes. Harmonic minor, he's going to a minor key, exact. All right, so now then you see that. And then there's the odd elements, uses of odd, what I would call intervallic material, perhaps, or ultra chromatic material, or perfectly playing in and around the key rather than being in the key or around it, called side slipping or playing outside. So those are the other aspects of how the music is handled in an improvisational context. You would obviously take something you know very well, and by simply moving it around, you can make it become other things. So I look for that as soon as possible. That's part of the assimilation, internalization phase, which is the longest phase, because it's the simplest thing to do is to see a transcription, and most of them are published now, and just learn it, figure out the fingering. Obviously, on the guitar, if you're doing a saxophone solo, you have to figure out the fingering. And so, again, that's where Pat's help was invaluable, because he taught me how it works, where the chords are with the lines. Where's that shape that goes with that lick?
Yeah.
Where's the chord shape? And then underneath that, there would be concepts like minor conversion or substitution, or implied harmony that isn't there. Things like that come out of the jazz picture that we still use, even if, like, you listen to a Robin Ford solo, and when he goes out, like in, let's say, Help the Poor, he will actually address the bebop genre for a few seconds, and then the move to wherever he's going is made even more profound and more impactful. One of my favorites.
Yeah.
He had an album once called Inside Story in about 76, 77. I transcribed get probably 3/4 of that album.
As a musician, transcribing, as we're discussing right now, what you take from it is the impression that you get from it, the ideas that you get from it, you make it your own. How has that helped you as a musician and developing your own unique voice as a musician? And what advice would you give aspiring players that are learning material these days? Which you kind of already elaborated on a little bit, and talking about, making it your own, but can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Probably one of the best examples I can give you is actually something in reality rather than something of me just describing it in words. The actual sounds are more important, and you can have the picture with the video. So that's a nice adjunct to having just the sound. I wish I'd had videos of George Benson playing or something, the exact licks that I was trying to learn. Anyway, the point I'm making is if you would have any of your listeners or viewers go to the YouTube selections that I forwarded you, One Note Samba, very much you'll hear the influence of Joe Pass, Pat Martino, and Cannonball Adderley. I have direct licks of those three in there. I could point them out as I go. And then in the other example is a Stormy Monday, which is a blues the same night but later. And with licks that are probably more closely associated with T-Bone Walker, Eric Clapton, and B.B. King, all done on the same guitar with the same rig. No overdrive pedal or anything. Straight into a Fender Twin. It's a matter of changing the sound organically rather than necessarily always relying on a pedal.
Right. Yeah.
Pedal will give you a better, obviously enhances what you're doing already. But I've always believed that you should be able to play with just almost like an acoustic guitar amplified.
Yeah.
I didn't have a fuzz box when I first started. I had a Silvertone amp and a Les Paul Jr.
You crank the amp up until it's distorted naturally.
Distortion wasn't a big deal when I first started out. Honestly, there was a little bit of distortion maybe in Rumble, but all the surf music was relatively clean. All the Beatles stuff that I first learned and Stones, they weren't really playing with distortion until, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, which was a fuzz box. And then when I got into Jeff Beck heavily with the Yardbirds, then I said, okay, I've got to have a fuzz tone because that's what he was using. He was using fuzz on a lot of the Yardbird stuff with a telly.
Now, was that a pedal that they made back then called a fuzz pedal?
I think he used a Sound City pedal that people were using, Color Sound or something like that. That all the English people, I think him and Jimmy Page both used that pedal. But I used a little simple thing that plugged into my telly called a Jordan Boss Tone. It plugged into the guitar and then it had a cable. And I used to do my Jeff Beck impression, Jeff's Boogie with that thing, and the Yardbird shapes of things and stuff like that.
You know what the Yardbirds used? Didn't you just...
Yeah, there was that that Color Sound pedal, I believe.
Yeah,
Sound.
they were just saying,
it was sort of a very primitive distortion unit by comparison with what we have now, like the Zen Drive or something, or something from Exotics. Those are like boutique pedals. They didn't have that then. They just had a fuzz.
I see in the background you have Fender amps there.
I have my vintage, which I love very much, as my main amp for playing. If I don't want to take it out anymore, but it's a '66 Super Reverb, which I like very much. And I have a couple of Fender Twins that are more on my, if I gig with an organ trio, I want a clean sound, loud. It would be the Fender Twins. But I have a bunch of other amps. I've got my, I sent you pictures of the band I had in the 80s. I still have those Marshalls that are in that picture. The first
Marshall with a Marshall. Wolf Marshall with a Marshall. You can almost say that you created it, right?
Nothing else does the job, man.
I agree. That's what I have. I have a JCM 900. And
I have the 800. I have the 800, and I have the early non-master, like 1970. Like what Hendrix would have had on Band of Gypsies, that kind of thing.
Nice.
But it was the first one in America that's red. Look at the photos I sent you. They're pictures of in the country club, and you'll see there's two stacks, a more modern black one, and then I have my red one, which is my main rig. And just to the left of that is my distortion pedal, which was basically Metallica's head, the Mark II C Plus.
Yeah.
as a fuzz box with a power soak on it.
Yeah. So
Into the Marshalls.
isn't that made by Mason Boogie?
Basic Boogie, right.
Yeah.
But Steve Lukather turned me onto the idea of using it in those days just as a front end distortion unit.
Right.
It's all. So we just put a power soak on it, or what we used to call in those days like an attenuator.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Load and I still have the original Boogie load resistor that it came with, but it's exactly like what Luke had on in that period, because I had done a session with him for Starlicks, and we got to talking and became friends and stuff, and he shared with me what he was using and the details. And that's what I started using on stage in 1985, 84, 85, somewhere in there.
How do you feel about plugins?
Some of them are good.
Have you tried? Is there any preference as far as that?
I was involved with the development and promotion of the earliest amp modelers by Fender called the Cyber Twins.
Cool. Awesome.
Me and Buddy Guy were the first two guys that were using it professionally out. So if you look at the early ad, like 2000, that's for Cyber Twin, you'll see both Buddy Guy and me talking about it.
Are you familiar with IK Multimedia or Neural DSP or whatever?
Some people use the Helix system.
Yeah, by Line 6. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, let's see who Carlos Rios. Do you know Carlos at all?
No, but I'll look him up. Trust me.
Well, if you listen to his playing on an album called Brother to Brother, your life changes. It's like Carlton meets Pat Martino. It's just like, wow, on top of pop songs with R&B feel. That's the kind of fusion I love. It's like Robin Ford with more bebop.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. So are you saying he's using a Helix?
Yeah, he was out on the road with Fleetwood Mac a while back, and we got to talking, and he mentioned he was using the Helix system, and we were doing a FaceTime, and he actually played it for me. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. I use the Neural DSP and IK Multimedia plugins. But do you think that they sound like overprocessed these days, like the plugins?
I rarely use them except for like a convenience live.
Yeah.
But normally in the studio, I have all the amps. I have everything from like a 1938 Gibson EH150, one of the earliest amps ever made, the Charlie Christian amp, the little tiny thing that folds up like a suitcase. I have that all the way going to like a brand new Hendrickson. And in between, you got the Fenders and the Marshalls and the Soldanos and the Boogies and Roland Jazz Chorus and, you name it.
Yeah.
I have a beautiful Gibson 50 from 51 that I love with a 15 in it. It's fantastic amp.
Now, you've transcribed a lot of rock music, virtuoso musicians like Joe Satriani, Yngwie. Now, with that, with that background, I would think that, what was it that influenced your passion for jazz music, or was it always there?
Just always wanting to discover new sounds and move forward with the music. I felt at one point that I had reached, I'd say 70, a certain pinnacle in blues playing where I'd been able to play all the Buddy Guy stuff I wanted, all of the Hendrix Red House stuff that I wanted, all the Clapton, Mick Taylor, Peter Green, anybody else playing blues, Mike Bloomfield, those kind of players. I learned all their stuff and I liked it. But it was something I did now on my own. I didn't need to study it anymore. Now I was just playing what I was hearing.
Yeah.
So if I Hoochie Coochie Man, I would think, oh, what did Jimmy play when he was with Alex Corner? Yes. Okay, I remember his phrase. Or if I'm playing I Can't Quit You, Baby, I may tap into a Mick Taylor phrase because he played such a great version of that with John Mayall.
You feel like you hit a brick wall, maybe?
Not a brick wall, just a plateau.
A plateau.
What I found is the blues just needed to go somewhere else. It just couldn't stay in that box.
Yeah.
So the blues element in jazz, which I heard definitely people like Howard Roberts had blues licks that were different. They were kind of more sophisticated and more unusual, but they were the blues. You could tell they were the blues when he did Watermelon Man. I mean, you may or may not know this, but he tried to do briefly in the early instrumental years when Dick Dale was around and Various instrumental groups were very popular right before the Beatles. Booker T and the MGs, that period, Safaris, Wipeout, all that kind of stuff. When that was happening, he had tried to do a career as an instrumental playing pop songs. So he did Watermelon Man. And I remember coming home from school, in fact, Mitch Holder is another guy who's a Howard guy like me. And he said, I remember coming home to see the Lloyd Thaxton show in LA. That was a local little show, after school show, kind of like a little lower grade version of American Bandstand. And there was Howard playing that black guitar that I now have, by the way. And he was playing that song with the shades on and the black turtleneck. And I thought, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. That is so much hipper than a bunch of guys dressed in sharkskin suits with skinny ties playing Wipeout. I thought, now that's much cooler. But of course, I couldn't access it. It was way too advanced. But I could recognize the blues factor. And I put a little bookmark on there and said, I'm going to come back to this when I get better.
It's awesome. Here's something that I wanted to ask you. The 3 Bs, blues, bebop, and ballads. That's something you coined. True jazz artists. Yeah. So how do modern players navigate that balance? And which new voices have impressed you lately?
Let's see. Probably, I like the traditionalists in jazz still because they're playing the American songbook stuff. So people like Pascual Grasso is like the new hot Joe Pass type of player. Very, very beautiful technique. And if you listen to him with Samara Joy, you're hearing him in context of the music rather than just virtuoso coming at you, so that it's not quite as intimidating, because he can be quite intimidating. He's got such a high level of technique. So him, Gilad Hexelman on the more modern side, Oz Noy out of New York. Do you know Oz's work?
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, he's kind of a funky player with lots of bebop elements in him, but he plays a Strat, and he can play R&B gigs. Great player. Again, somebody that I respect tremendously, and a new player. So Gilad, of course, and him, Oz Noy. And then for the more traditional guy that's maybe after Wes and Pat Martino and George Benson is still Peter Bernstein to me. He took a lot of that Wes Montgomery, Grant Green stuff, but moved it into the modern harmony of things like Brad Meldau or something, that kind of style, that real heavy, harmonically rich New York style. So, but he has the kind of the Wes Montgomery, Grant Green sound, archtop guitar, hollow body, big, clean, fat sound.
So when you listen to these guys, you can tell their influences probably right away.
Sure, some are fusion players, like Oz would tend to be more fusion-y, putting in bebop elements, but I've heard him play Thelonious Monk's, Bemsha swing, and puts all the bebop stuff in there. It sounds great on a Strat the way he's got it going.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of rock guys or metal guys, for example, feel like that they've had like a plateau, like you did, and I noticed recently that a lot of them are getting into like jazz, or they feel like they need to explore elsewhere. And, you have like Marty Friedman, who played for Megadeth, or Anthony or whatever, an amazing player who just felt like he hit a plateau, and that's why he left Megadeth. And, some of the stuff that he's doing now is amazing. And then I was just recently talking to Alex Skolnick, who, has pursued jazz as well. And, you wouldn't think that with, from their background that would have such an influence on them. So why do you think that is? Why do you think jazz is the next step, for
other people?
Yeah, for other people, or for maybe even yourself,
It's just a matter of wanting to move forward and learning new things. And I mean, I studied classical for a number of years, so I went through that process where I didn't even have an electric guitar. I just played nylon. So with my fingers, the whole thing, the Bach stuff, the Villalobos, Fernando Sor, Torrega, all of that stuff. So, I mean, I went through that and dedicated classical. I did that for like 2 years. And I still keep it because now I use it in the studio once in a while when need be. And so it's nice to have that technique, or to play these solos with your fingers sometimes on a nylon string is nice. But, you know, you go, it's a matter of advancing in your own artistic vision. And for me, guitar is part of the art of living in general. It's just another creative thing I do. I sometimes I'll paint a picture or draw a picture, and that will be my artistic statement commensurate with a guitar solo. Or I'll write something, which is why I like writing my column for Vintage Guitar, because that's an artistic statement about something I want to talk about. I'm talking about Axis Bold as Love this month. Last month I did Queen with transcribed examples, because that's the key to everything that makes me different from anyone else doing this stuff. Is I'm not a pure journalist. I am like an analysis chronicler, also some pop culture, but the music. Always have transcribed music and some analysis of what the player was doing or might have been thinking. And same with my course. It's filled with transcription. That's what makes it different than other guitar courses teaching jazz, is the fact that I include transcriptions and things that are really played from the very first page.
Once I started to get familiar with your transcriptions, I knew that they were going to be authentic. I knew that they were going to be spot on. And so when I was younger, I mean, of course, all we had was like Guitar Magazine, Guitar World. We didn't have it handed to us like we do today, but I always knew that your transcriptions were going to be authentic and spot on. And, you know, so I started looking for your transcriptions specifically, and I got familiar with your name, and, you know, I started really following you back, you know, at that point. And that's why you're here today, because you've been such a big influence on me. And that.
One thing I want to share with you, that was really never intended. That's just a matter of wanting to be a musician your whole life. I decided 14, I want to be a musician the rest of my life. So what is it going to take? Sometimes I have to study theory. So I had to go to college. I graduated from UCLA with a theory and composition degree. They didn't have guitar at that point. So I had that, theory and composition. And then other things happened, like when the rock scene kind of didn't yield me the results that I wanted necessarily in a career path. Even though I played and loved the music, I started writing it more, and the publishing magazines just came about at that time. The tab books, the magazines, and all that stuff started in the late 70s. I can probably trace it back to the first Led Zeppelin complete book, which is where I concocted my own form of notation that I used in Starlix from part of the Led Zeppelin complete. Instead of tab, we use the fractions because it takes up less room. Booklets would have been much bigger and harder to produce. So I created that system based on Led Zeppelin complete. If you ever go back and look at it, you'll see that I use that fraction system. And then I added bend notation from the melodic side. So for people who actually read music, they would see the bends notated and the vibrato and that sort of thing.
Do you think that you helped develop the transcription method for guitar throughout the years? So how it's changed and progressed and evolved? Because I remember the Starlix book, you know, I did a revision for Michelangelo Badio's Starlix, which, you know, brought it up to date, you know, using like programs like Sibelius and
Sure, of course.
And they have Guitar Pro. There's another one that has standard, you know, rules and methods of transcribing for guitar, which makes it a lot easier. Now, do you think you were part of that evolution?
You have to understand that when I did those Starlix books, what you see printed is actually my real calligraphy. Everything in there was something I drew. That's my art experience.
Yeah.
I think is just as important to me personally as music, in terms of a human experience. I love that my career is in music, but art sometimes is what it takes. I mean, I even brought a couple of samples if you want to see of the artistic side.
Sure. Were you drawing little stick figures too, or no?
There's a picture I did probably about, a couple of years ago of Jimi Hendrix.
Wow, that's crazy. That's awesome. So you're also an artist.
I recognize this gentleman.
Wow, that's awesome. Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page, correct.
Yeah.
You know, I'm working on a few others, but I revisit them from time to time. I wanted to be a musician all my life, so that's why I pursued transcription, because I decided I had to go into publishing. It was a natural result of what I was doing in the studios. I was getting called to play on sessions, do a solo like Jimmy Page, do a solo like Eric Clapton, do a solo like Robin Ford, do a solo like Brian Setzer. And I was copying all those players because I had been doing that since I was 16 years old. I mean, since I played Hideaway on stage, Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and stuff at the teenage fair, I was doing that stuff back when I was really young. So when the time session scene in LA came about, I had a specialist role, not like Lukather or Carlton or anything. They came in as the player. They just did their thing. They called me when they wanted like a quick solo
style.
Yeah, or Eric Clapton or something, or anybody. Well, you name it. It could be anybody. It could be Lee Ritenour. It could be George Benson. It's just different players. Joe Pass. Whatever it took to do that particular session. It was just my impression of it. But producers just want the sound. They don't really know, OJ, that's a chord Joe never used. They don't really care about that. They just want it to fit into the tune. Yeah. So I was doing a lot of that work, and I ran into Starlink's people through a book called, or a magazine called The Music Connection in LA. And that's how musicians networked, through the Music Connection. And so I met them. They needed people to imitate guitarists. I ended up being the only guy that they hired. They hired 3 or 4 people at the beginning to do the different things, but it was easy because I did the notation too. Yeah. So I would create the licks. I was transcribing the licks. I would write the licks down. I'd perform the licks in the studio. It was like one-stop shopping. So then they expanded. They became very popular. I realized at the time there's a separate stream of professional publishing companies and these self-publishing companies. And Starlix, hit its peak with the great videos, Brian May, Lukather, Larry Carlton, Iommi, Albert Lee, the list, Carlos Cavazo, from Ray Flack, the list goes on. Those were all products I was involved with, or Night Ranger, all that stuff. So anyway, my point is that it was 2 streams. I went into the professional publishing world and started doing all the magazines and tab books. Hal Leonard had Rat. They had Iron Maiden. So I did those books. And then on the other side, Cherry Lane had Randy Rhoads with Ozzy, Michael Schenker, and Van Halen, and later Guns N' Roses. So, there's these streams, and I kind of worked for both of them.
Yeah.
I was under strict contract. There were 2 or 3.
Well, you were like the main guy to go to for transcriptions back then.
It was a very organic process. It came out of what I did. It wasn't really an effort to do something different. I'd been doing it for myself and for people like Pat Martino for years, because he had me do the transcriptions for his Library of Congress lead sheets that they copyright music with. I transcribed his albums for Warner Brothers, and those were in the Library of Congress. So he hired me to do that. I mean, he said, I know you're a pro, you're orchestrator of the union. I'm going to hire you, and it's the Warner Brothers budget. So let's do it.
Congratulations. Did you transcribe the Randy Rhoads tribute book too, or?
Yes, I did.
You did. Oh, thank you. Seriously,
that's one of my favorites, actually. That's probably the one that was the most evolved, because sometimes there was editing going on in the early transcriptions. They had in-house editors at Cherry Lane, and they didn't really understand guitar notation. They were mostly piano guys. By the way, here's a little interesting side note. You ever wonder why Day Tripper in the original songbook is in E flat? It should be in E. It's such obvious E string. Yeah. How come it's in E flat? Because E flat is an easier key to play for an amateur pianist than E.
Okay.
He's got 4 sharps and E flat's got 3 flats. It's easier. So they put those songs in those keys. That's what a pianist arranger from Cherry Lane told me, because I asked him, I said, why is Day Tripper in E flat? Can't you hear that it's in E? John, you had mentioned in some of the material you forwarded me that there was going to be something about the area of creativity and particular books that I recommend. Since we mentioned we're really going off very deeply into a more specific musical or even publishing business tangent for a second, I wanted to, just so that it doesn't escape us with the time, there's 2 books I recommend that all guitarists should get who are interested in creativity and a perception of music in general. These aren't guitar books that I've written or anything like that. I recommend, of course, get my books if you want to learn how to play like Pat Martino or something like that, or Yngwie or whatever, get the transcribed books. But that's another story. I'm talking about books. And so I have one over here by my board. This one is a very good book about perception of music by Aaron Copland. It's called Music and Imagination.
I'll definitely get that.
A lot of really good stuff in there. And then the one for everyone about creativity is this book I highly recommend.
I like the title.
It's a real quick read. Well, you know, when you apply the things in there, you will become a more creative musical person if you apply those principles to music.
I will definitely check them out.
Creating.
I love it when artists like you recommend books, because some of them, you know, I would have never even been aware of. All right. Now your jazz guitar course, Mastering the Jazz Language, Hal Leonard, True Fire, centers on language-based immersion, harmony, melody, improvisation. Can you summarize your philosophy, simulation, generalization, and application? Can you summarize that?
I've spoken about it before, but let's just imagine you have a lick from Charlie Parker. You acquire it by learning it from the tablature / notation, and you figure out you're going to play, you're going to practice it. You want to get it up to higher level of performance rather than just reading it off a sheet of music. I encourage memorizing ASAP. Memorize phrases. Don't get stuck in always having to read the music.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck in getting married to the tab. A tab is just a means to an end. I never write tab for myself. That's strictly for students and for publishing. I just write the positions down like classical music. Roman numeral 5 means I have my finger on the 5th fret. End of story. That's the rest. I know where the notes are. And people should know that. They should know the names of the notes they play and where they are on the fingerboard. Those, no matter what form of music you play, you should know that in its basic form. It's easy to learn, but you have to make it a concerted effort to do it. And get away from, so anyway, the 3 phases. Acquisition, you learn a lick. The next phase is the longer phase. It would be internalization, what I call / assimilation. That's where you internalize it, where you don't need it to be out there anymore. It's now in here. You're hearing it. You're hearing how it is in different positions, because a guitar is a positional instrument. You don't just play in one place.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to be married to a capo. But that's not what I'm talking about. The great players use a capo for sound, not because they're unable to play it.
Okay.
That's usually the amateur musician. Someone like George Harrison playing Here Comes the Sun, it's because it sounds good, barred up.
Yeah.
With strings ringing and everything. So anyway, my point is that assimilation phase, you're going to take it apart, you're going to analyze it, you're going to do all of this stuff in step time, and then you bring up pieces of it in real time. And that experience will give you all the knowledge you need that can be drawn out of that lick, enough that you can actually live off that. A simple cell will allow you to play a tune like Giant Steps. On the other hand, trying to treat it like a scale exercise will be confounding and will cause you to have a lot of run into a minefield, basically.
Yeah.
Basically speaking. And then the final phase, of course, is innovation. That's when you've changed the lick, you've moved it around. You, as Howard would say, sometimes you play it inside out and backwards. You know where the shape is on the guitar, but what it would be like if I start on the higher note instead of the lower note? What about the middle string instead of the high string? Things like that. And you keep the shape and you play with the sounds that are in that grouping that make that melody.
Now this is right. Are you recommending this specifically for like your jazz guitar course or
anything other than classical music? Because classical music, to a limited extent, you can use it, but anything that involves improvisation.
Okay.
On the instrument requires that you have something different to do with it. You're improvising. You're not just reproducing it. That's not really improvisation.
So like you said, when you write, like you don't write the tab out for yourself, or you don't have like a transcription set out for you. You just have the position where you are going to play the notes, and you know what scales and everything that you can use. And so
I'll show you a real close-up of this. So if I go here, you can see a line of music, see the Roman numerals?
Yeah. So that's just the position that you're going to be playing this at?
That's where I determined I first heard it when I put it on the instrument. Okay. That doesn't mean it's going to stay there, because in the internalization phase, assimilation phase, you might change that. And before it goes anywhere else, it may have a different fingering.
Okay.
These are just the notes right now. This is just to show you how I symbolize it. And then on the other side are the analysis elements. What is the scale doing, if you want to even attribute it to a scale concept? So that would be the way I would do it. And that allows you to create something and make up your own version of it, basically. That's what I'm talking about. And ultimately, that should be the goal of why you transcribe something anyway, unless you want to be in an Ingmar Malmsteen cover band, tribute band.
I think it's hard to break away from that.
Well, it takes effort. You have to practice doing that rather than just practice the instrument like a blunt instrument. And
Yeah.
instead of playing the guitar as a tool, they get to a point where you know the guitar where all the positions are.
Yeah.
And then the challenge is to find where the melody sits best on the instrument, because it is a string instrument. It's going to sound better in certain areas. That's just, you know that from the violin.
Do you have any advice or any, techniques or methods or whatever that you could use as an aspiring player to learn all the notes on the instrument,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, and
Yeah. I wrote a rock guitar method back in the early 90s, 8 volumes. And when I toured behind it, I did 2 years of touring behind it. Hal Leonard sent me out on 2 tours, 93, 94, and 98 later to finish it up when I completed the series of 8. But one of the things that came up in our seminars right away was, how do you learn all the notes? You basically learn 1 string a week and name the notes. You're going to feel like a complete knucklehead if you have to keep saying the note out loud. Sooner or later, you're going to put your finger on the 5th fret of the 6th string and just know it's A.
Yeah.
Because you've told yourself it's A for 3 days.
Right.
And by the end of 6 weeks, well, not 5, because the high string and low string are the same notes. So 5 weeks, you will know every note on the fingerboard, at least by name. Then you decide, okay, I've got to put chords around that. Then you would naturally go to what might be called the cage system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the basic way that guitar comes from open chords, which makes sense, if you're going to stay in that realm. But of course, there are more than just those shapes.
Yeah.
Those are simple triads or basic major chords with doublings. But the idea is that you're going to take that, and there are in-between positions. There's like an F position where you put your hand down. It's not quite like the E. Your hand is sort of different in a different place. Yeah. And that's the movement in between. I wrote a scenario for that, and I created a course in TrueFire called the Uncaged Jazz Improvisation, where you break out of the cage system as a strict perception, and instead you go into playing in every position and how you connect notes. Again, going back to the original premise, no bad notes, just bad connections. Okay. It's that on steroids, plus the idea of using the caged concept as a point of departure.
When I was learning notes on the instrument, I always kept in mind like the C major scale or the A minor scale, where there was, a half step between B and C and E and F, and then all the rest were whole steps. So, and then anything in between, as you're ascending, is going to be a sharp, and if you're descending, it's going to be a flat. So that's how I learned myself the position, the notes on the guitar. And as far as positions go, though, when you're reading a piece of music, that's important, and what position you're going to play it in on the guitar, because, you played in like a couple different positions on the guitar as opposed to the piano, which has the middle C, so
one place you can play it.
Yeah. So how do you determine that when you're...
Listen, having done work in both complete freedom and making things up in the studio and sight reading, there are 2 different realities. When you sight read, you just have to scan it quickly and determine what position you're in, and you're not going to be wandering around the neck because you're sight reading. The whole goal is to get those notes out. So you find by scanning, is Howard Roberts' concept, you quickly scan, determine where you think it fits best, takes experience, and then you commit yourself to being in that area to play those notes. But when you're reading music that you can read now as a reference rather than sight read it cold, then you can work it out.
Take your time and work it out.
Yeah, everyone did that when I was with Burt Bacharach. Everyone was working on their parts. I got together with Burt at the end of rehearsals. There's a video, or not video, but there's some stills I sent you that show us working on parts when the whole band is gone. You'll see like a drum kit with nobody there, mics, music stands, nobody's around. It's just the 2 of us working on guitar and piano parts.
Many aspiring players struggle with Coltrane's giant steps. Your book provides patterns, rhythmic devices, and modeled solos. What's one overlooked concept that transformed players' understanding?
There's two that are really basic, actually, that I actually saw this subject, and it actually intrigued me. I could actually show you the concepts if you want to see them. Maybe easier than to try to explain it.
Sure.
Okay, now giant steps, just so you see what I'm talking about. Giant steps has these chords in the beginning: B, D, G, B flat, E flat.
Okay.
Okay, now that can become a real matrix of confusion if you try to paste a different scale on that. So instead, think of a very simple melodic motif. And I'm going to give you this one, which is right out of one of Train's solos. I'm just using the motif. So first chord, B, so that's one concept. Using the same cell, you can see that this E becomes this D. A little pentatonic pattern.
You're basing your melody around the chord changes.
Of course.
Specifically with the chords. Yeah. That's
the thing about giant steps is that first pattern has to be learned as its own kind of lick, so that you have second nature feeling about it. If you have to think about which scale you're using for every chord, it goes by too fast. You can't. Yeah. It's just like trying to figure out every quick blues lick that's inside of a Gary Moore phrase.
Yeah.
You're going to stumble. It's just a natural flow. You're just going to have to go with the flow and memorize patterns. But I wanted to share that concept with your viewers because it's a very simple way to melodically connect. You just need a strong melody. So, like I said, I use Coltrane's melody of the pentatonic. So you not automatically have those lines already under your fingers and in your ear. You're just going to use it as a motif, like this. Right, and there's our first phrase to E flat. Yeah. And you notice the junction when you play E flat major becomes A minor very easily. So you have a melody that does this. Comes up E flat, comes down A minor. And right away you start to say to yourself, okay, there's a lot of continuity. It's all melodic, harmonic continuity. I'm not pasting any scales.
Yeah.
Fragments of melody that you could attribute to scales, but they're not really scales in the sense of running one note like a ladder from top to bottom from the root. What you're doing is you're looking at the melodic content. Sometimes it's in the upper part of the chord, and sometimes it's in the lower part. The first one starts on the root. The next one starts on the third of A minor, or the seventh, or the 11th of D. And the next time you're going to put a D triad on top of G, which is, of course, the ninth, major ninth. And the next one is going to be the major 11th. And then E flat. And the other one I got from Pat Martino I want to share with your audience is that, let's say you got the second phrase and it's going to do a more convoluted procedure. Let's say you've got G, B flat, E flat, F sharp, B. Okay, it's a lot of chords.
Yeah.
He just looks at it as minor conversions in between. So it's G major, F minor, E flat, C sharp minor, B. So you can do the same motif. Same exact idea. That's another great principle to use. And it's very guitaristic. Why? Because the tone stays even. You're not changing string groupings where, suddenly that note doesn't have the right timbre.
Yeah.
Johnson made me very aware when I was transcribing his stuff and getting together with him, very aware of the tone of the string. We call it timbre in music, in classical music in general. Every instrument has its unique timbre, whether it's a flute, guitar, or a piano. They all have their unique timbre. And so what we're looking at there is we're keeping the melody unique and same shape. And you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, G, and then... So the second one is just F minor conversion for a B flat 9 chord. That's basically all it is. F minor can be a B flat 9. Really very, very similar. So you can move. Yeah, it's a... in shell chords, let's say. Right? You have this G major.
Out.
And then B, but... and you have that shape, and out of that you get the line. And then here maybe play blues like. So you come out of that and play something that doesn't make it feel so patterny. The key to the learning giant steps, which I always have my students specify, is to try to put in at least one of your language lines, something you've transcribed. Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, whatever, put that inside, somewhere inside of giant steps. And that way you don't feel like you're only playing one way of doing it that came directly from one take of Coltrane. You know, now we have the heavyweight champion box set of Coltrane. It's a box set of everything he did in Atlantic, which was that period of giant steps, Atlantic Records. And what they did is they put all the giant steps takes on a CD. You can hear them all. There's like 10, 15 different ones. Awesome. And he does different things. We just have the master to listen to, and that's what everyone learned because it was like frozen in time. That's what I'm telling you. Transcription does not stay frozen in time. You should make them into living, organic entities so that you can shape it how you want it to be. It's a piece of clay. It could be an ashtray. It can be a bust. It could be a bust of Socrates. It could be an ashtray. That's the artistic experience. You'll decide when you look at a piece of clay or a scale in content, what is that thing going to be ultimately? Blues is the ultimate thing for that because there's so many blues players playing in the same key, playing the same notes, because you're not really going to deviate much from the blues scale. Yeah. Otherwise, it sounds like you're not playing the blues anymore. And so that's not good. You don't want to be playing blues to have it not sound like blues.
Honestly, I love, listening to the blues, but I've never been into it because of the basic 12-bar structure of it, and it's like every song is based on that, and or it doesn't sound like blues, like you're saying. And then in classical music, I'm a foundation in classical theory too, and I absolutely, I love it. I mean, that's my group of everything, but with that's also limited too, because just that briefly summarize, I guess, is that everything's symmetrical, and but you're talking about is thinking outside of the box. I think that's awesome what you were just showing as far as taking the chord and instead of getting locked into a scale, you're basing the melody around the chord changes.
That's correct.
That's incredible. I mean,
that's the ultimate tune. You should really do it too. When I think of giant steps, the ultimate thing about playing it is to make it feel musical by actually adhering to the chord tones and then doing something creative that hasn't been done in the obvious versions of Coltrane's takes. Because you can hear Scott Henderson playing giant steps. He does something different. You can hear Mike Stern playing giant steps. He does something different. You can hear Pat Metheny playing giant steps. He does something different. He's not playing the Coltrane solo note for note.
As a metal guitar player myself, I think that, we get locked into just, the scales and, certain specific riffs. And it's like, okay, it's an E minor, so I'm just going to play everything in E minor that I know. Well, what would make it more interesting is following that pattern that you were just suggesting is with the chord changes.
Everything in jazz that has harmonic content, chord changes are everything.
That would definitely make a solo much more interesting.
Well, it gives you something that you may not have considered, which is the first step towards innovation is discovering something. Oh, I didn't know it could do that. And then working on that reality with the goal of making it come off smoothly when you play live.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. What are your favorite daily or weekly practice rituals, routines, warm-ups, transcription habits that keep your ear sharp and creatively flowing?
It's all documented in this book. It's like what I do. If I start at the beginning, just to give you 4 or 5 pages of what I've done, when did I start this book? 11/22. So let's say the very first thing is Pat Martino's navigation concept for Full House, the live version. The next thing is Pat Metheny's Spring 8 Here solo. Okay, after that is All of Me, a model solo based on simply language. It's just improvisation. The next one is that's a continuation. I hear a Rhapsody, the Coltrane solo, transcribed. It's many pages long, so I have it, and then there's analysis of that. Okay, so Just Squeeze Me, the Coltrane solo that he did, must have done it with maybe Miles. Then a bunch of 2-5-1s out of the cage position. That's just a technical exercise that has just ways of getting in and around the cage position using different
Yep.
2-5-1 ideas. Okay, so that kind of stuff. So it's something different every time. It's not really like I have one regime. I have so many students that want to learn unique things that I really don't have a one-trick pony way of teaching. I tell people if they want that, they really should go to my books. I have so much published. Those are like a snapshot.
Yeah.
If you really want that kind of thing, go there. And then a lot of times I reach out to my students who go through that process. Like one fellow just went through my Grant Green book, and we spent all this time explaining why Grant might have done that, why it reacts to the chord changes in that way, that melody. Why does he position that chord melody around a certain standard set of changes and come up with a different result than you'd expect, maybe from Joe Pass or from John Coltrane or from Pat Martino or whoever.
Now do you still do the online Zoom or Skype sessions for teaching? Are you accepting any students? And if you are, where can people find you at or contact?
On my website is a thing about private lessons. Well, I find teaching to be one of the real joys because that's part of why I do this, is to share this. If I'm not performing it live to share it, which is one way to share it, the other way is to share it through the educational process. That's why I like my years at UCLA. I was there for 13 years, and it's advanced stuff. It's advanced improv. It's not like you're learning notes on the guitar. You don't get to come into the system unless you pass an audition.
Well, you're a busy guy, man. It's hard to stay busy these days as a musician, though. You have to really hustle. But you're already established pretty well. And
one thing I tell my students who are interested in performing career, because I had to do this. When I first moved to San Diego, I really didn't know anybody on the scene. So I met people, and I realized that a lot of the gigs that I wanted to get simply didn't exist. They were like downtown in a very small section. They were kind of monopolized by a small group of players because there just weren't that many gigs. So it was in North County. I said, I'm just going to go to the resorts and make a gig. And you create a gig. I had a band that was a great band that grew out of a resort. We did Friday and Saturday nights there with a fusion band. And then one night, the guy who did both nights, the leader, the sax player, he said, well, let's do something different for Friday night. And I don't really want to play, so form a different group. And I ended up being there every Friday night for almost a year. We left that gig after about a year, 9 months or something, and we started playing better resorts. Because there's like one thing about San Diego is there's all these resorts, so there's opportunities. I played at the Sheraton one night. I played 3 nights at the Hyatt, which is the kind of the high-end golf course one, real high roller one. But I created those gigs.
so you make your own way,
You
basically.
go there and you tell them, hey, I got this music that would fit in beautifully with what you got. A bit of salesmanship, you have to come in and be, authoritative and have a nice press kit or something, that kind of thing, at least a picture of yourself with the band maybe, and some sort of a write-up. I went nuts. I did the folders and everything. So there was a professional press kit. So I would tell all these young players coming up is don't be dismayed by the fact that there aren't these gigs just hanging on the vine ready for you to pick. Instead, go and create the gigs.
That's good advice.
I'm hungry for live music because so much of it is now kind of very synthetic. What they're listening to is mostly coming out of earbuds at the gym. A whole new generation starting to appreciate live music, but you do have to go out and make it happen. Long story short, you just have to network with people. So you have to go out there. My point is you have to go out there, do things, meet people, go where the music is, and don't be afraid of playing for free in the beginning.
I've had to sell my own tickets to shows,
Go.
Sure that I'm not the only one, but
The Beatles went through all kinds of crazy stuff to try to get their act rolling, and they needed Brian Epstein to finally pull it together on a more professional level. That reminds me, good autobiographical books are worth talking about, too. You should have some of your viewers check out, if they're Beatle fanatics, the best book I've ever found for people who really are interested in Beatles music rather than just stories. But the stories are tied into the music with analysis and all that, is The Beatles as Musicians. It's 2 volumes by Walter Everett. Really good book, but it requires background. Somebody with a theory background would read it and go, wow, I had no idea this was happening in Michelle. Another good one is the Annette Carson book on Jeff Beck called Crazy Fingers. I recently got, I gave a copy away years ago when it first came out, was The Gospel According to Luke. Lukather's is a great way to go into the music business and see how the inside is from a band perspective. Because he really tells how that band went through its stuff and all his Michael Jackson and all that stuff. Eddie Van Halen, getting him on Beat It, all that's in there. I talked to him about 2 weeks ago, and he mentioned he's on tour and he's studying for my jazz course.
Is he?
Yeah, he sent me a picture of him holding it.
That's cool.
From the hotel room.
That's definitely cool, man. Especially coming from him.
He's a good friend. He's liking it. He knows jazz, but the idea of a course, what it is it's all in one shopping.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the word course is not a course in the sense of like an educational course. It's a course. It's an adventure. It's a journey.
Yeah. Well, it's your presentation of it that makes it interesting. You're
tying in all the transcription and look. I had personal experience with Joe Pass, George Van Epps, Pat Martino, George Benson, Herb Ellis, Johnny Smith. And their insights are in this book.
I'll be scoping that out, definitely.
Well, you have transcription, so you'll notice right away that, once you learn the basics of what is being played, then the whole thing that remains is how it's being played. Every player has a different way of how they do the same notes.
Yeah, it's in their own approach. And that's awesome because you really have an understanding of everything that's going on from your years of transcribing and analysis. And, I'm sure your presentation is amazing. I'm definitely going to have to check out the book, and I'll put a link to it as well.
Everything that you expect in a course. I studied all the courses, of course, over the years, like Mickey Baker, Joe Pass, Howard Roberts, all the different courses. And I just wanted it to be the best of that type of thing, plus transcriptions.
That's awesome, man.
And then the transcriptions yield model solos, which are one way that you can play it that I picked out. And then the other way, you make up your own. Like my last model solo is, here's 10 phrases. Now make up your own solo. You pick the one you want to start with and connect it to the second one. That's going to be your thing. The minute you do that, you're improvising.
That's what
idea. You don't put, when you improvise, you don't just put your hand down and hope something good happens. You already have an idea that some sound is going to come out of the area that you're holding with your hand on the instrument. You know ahead of time by playing it and practicing it what that's going to sound like.
That should be taught at all music schools.
I wish it would, yeah. Well, I teach it when I taught UCLA. That was a prerequisite.
Okay.
That was one of the things Kenny liked about my system of teaching.
I'm sure there's probably, in Musicians Institute where I went, they probably have courses like that, but I was taking a specific, direction. So,
did you study with Les Wise?
Ray Weiss, I studied with.
Okay. Les Wise, a good friend of mine, and he was at Musicians Institute, but may have been there when Howard Roberts, so it might have been before you got there. It might have been in the early 80s, late 70s. No, when were you there?
Recently, within the last 10 years. So.
Oh, well, no, he's long gone. That whole system has changed. I mean, the whole thing of Howard Roberts. By the way, I sent you a picture of me and Pat doing a clinic at GIT in 77.
Yeah, that's when it used to be called GIT, right?
That's right. Guitar Institute of Technology.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've learned all about the copyrights and the business side of music.
Yeah, it's not that hard. I mean, unless you become an attorney or something, then but hopefully you'd hire a good copyright attorney. If you get to that level, you wouldn't do it yourself.
Yeah, you definitely have to learn that stuff now because you pretty much have to be your own manager, your own promoter, your own agent, this and that. And that's one of the things that I learned at Musicians Institute was that I guess the surface of everything, just to be aware of it, I guess, so I can learn it on my own if need be, because you really have to be careful. These, I'm not just saying these things, but always have to be careful about things of that nature. But these are rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire. I'll try to give you rapid fire answers.
Favorite transcription from any musician?
You mean a transcription that was done by a musician?
How about done by you?
One that I've done.
Yeah.
Well, any of the ones I mentioned today I don't know if I have a particular favorite. I have, the ones I've been studying lately is Cannonball Adderley's version of Autumn Leaves. I think there's some great stuff in there. Coltrane's I Hear a Rhapsody. Of all time, one of my favorite ones, of course, is Eric Clapton Hideaway, because it's like my childhood. That's me at 16, learning my first real blues licks with string bends and good tone. So, that's a monument to me.
How about your most difficult transcription that you've had to do?
You know, probably the most difficult thing about transcribing is slow rhythms where there's rubato feel and you have to figure out the groupings, because when you count it mathematically, it falls into groups that may not be regular.
Yeah.
Ballads are phrased that way. Probably a lot of Holdsworth stuff is in groups like that because he plays a flourish of notes and it's in and around certain pivotal beats.
Yeah.
So you have to orient yourself to the beat. And so I find that to be like, to notate properly a really soulful ad lib B.B. King lick is harder than a fast bunch of 30-second notes with Ingve.
Yeah, because you know
So
that
it's so metronomically perfect that it's so obvious it could be played on a synthesizer.
Yeah, you know he's running up and down the scale, the harmonic minor scale, and you're like, you just put it in timing. But with somebody like B.B. King, I would think that it's more free time. You know,
it's how you would count it. So you could play it back by feel because you could hum it and sing it, and then you just transfer that feel to the guitar, the rhythm. But to notate it,
yeah.
So I devise systems of notation counting that I use when I do transcriptions so that I try to get the beat to flow, because if you just mark the beat, it may not be correct in terms of a musical execution. It'll be only in terms of mathematical perspectives. And that's not really how music is. To me, music's not mathematical. It gets too mathematical, it becomes something else. It becomes like a scientific experiment, more so than a piece of art. So you flow with it. You learn how to dance with it. When you transcribe, you have to learn how to dance with the music. And that meant for me learning how to conduct, which came directly out of classical training theory, is to do when you're counting a slow, you learn to conduct a beat for 4/4, let's say, is 1, 2, 3, 4. And you feel that pulse.
Yeah.
You start to feel that that's where the snare is. That's where the bass drum is. You start to look up, and then you feel that time. Yeah. And then later on, when it slows down and you go, da, 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 da.
So you think of it as like a conductor.
That's exactly right. And then you get a feeling of where the groups are because you know what's hitting on the main beat.
On the one or whatever.
Between there could be compressed into a group of 9 or something.
I was wondering about that with some of the transcriptions that I've seen where it's like really off the wall kind of free time or whatever. And
the danger of overcounting it mathematically is that you get these very complex figures that really B.B. King or Eric Clapton never meant to play. Yeah. Instead, you just have to give it a free time. I invented a system years ago with a Guitar for the Practicing Musician where I put a plus or a minus with a little dotted line that says this is either laid back or it's rushed. And it just didn't yet, but it still stays in rhythm. So you can see the figure written out properly. It's just played with freer time, that it sort of rushes. It's kind of a feeling of going to that note with more urgency, but it's still a normal figure. It still might be 8th notes rather than a 7 tied to a 16th note, tied to part of a 16th note triplet. That's coarse craziness. If I put that in front of Tommy Tedesco in the old days, he wouldn't have played that exactly right because it's uncountable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man, that you developed your own method.
Well, I think it makes sense. It comes directly out of classical music theory. That, I can tell you, is directly something I would use that classical music device if I was transcribing an Yngwie Malmsteen solo or a Randy Rhoads solo. Mm-hmm. It's because you still get beat orientation. You know where the beat is. And if you feel that, you notice, okay, from point A to point B, beat 1 to beat 2, there's a grouping. And inside there, you'll hear that grouping, especially if you slow it down. Because, of course, rhythmically, you have to slow things down. Otherwise, you'll psych yourself into thinking you're hearing something different.
Yeah.
Pitches you can do in real time a lot of times. But the actual rhythms, you need to figure out what that grouping is between point A and point B.
Yeah. That could be difficult. And
yes, it's time consuming. You learn to hear it, though. One of the great things I learned in the studio was when I was working with a big band is they had a great trumpet player who was just a perfect reader. And I took him aside one day, asked him, how did you learn to read these complicated rhythms so easily? He said, I've memorized the figures. I look at that. I said, oh, that's that figure tied to that figure. I see like groups of these things. I'm not really reading the rhythm and counting them like 1 E and a 2 E, they're not. That's just a bunch of 16th notes and there's some ties in it. I know what that figure sounds like. Seeing an arpeggio. You just look at arpeggio on notation and you can see it's every other note. You don't have to really figure it out. You just, okay, where's the root? And if you want to name it a chord. On the other hand, a lot of times you just see it as a set of intervals. It's just going up in thirds. That's an arpeggio. But you're not going to really like count the distances between each note. Say, oh, it's a whole step and now it's a minor third. That kind of stuff is not really how you look at a chord anyway. That's how you might do it as a term of an intervallic description on a grid, but that's not how it sounds against a chord as a structure.
Have you ever thought of doing a course? I know it's kind of, it's a personal question, but doing a course on transcribing?
Yeah, it's so personal. I don't know how you would get somebody to do that. You could do guidelines, maybe some examples, maybe tips for transcribing. But to actually do a course, you'd have to start with basic ear training. I think a lot of people, if it's not organic to what they do like it was for me, it's going to be hard to get past that early stage. Remember, I had that stuff subliminally pumped into me because my mom played this music and it wasn't scales or anything. It wasn't stupid mathematical patterns. It was beautiful music played like Chopin and Franz Liszt and Debussy. And I just hear that how she changed it. If it's perfect, I hear it one way. There's a little flub in the middle of that run. I hear it a different way. It should have been this chromatic thing. Oh, the trill is different. That kind of stuff. You'd notice that, and after a year or two of hearing that, you start to recognize those patterns because they're finite.
I've transcribed stuff myself, but if I had to do it like completely without having a guide, like let's say Guitar Pro, where it's like I'm transcribing it and I'll be telling me that I'm so many notes over the measure or so many notes under it to where I have to reanalyze it and realize that I did it wrong. I would be probably lost trying to do it exactly the way that you do it. I mean, that's very, very difficult.
Even though there's all these digital tools that exist now, when I came up, it was records and then it was reel-to-reel tapes. That's the way you saved your records. You bought a cheap reel-to-reel tape and nobody wanted them anymore, but they were good quality decks. Just nobody had them anymore. They're buying records and they're buying cassettes. So you go to like a used classified ads and just look at tape machines. It's like 10 of them, Akai, Techniques, all these great brands, and they're cheap because nobody wants them anymore. So I bought like great tape decks for like $100. Lasted me years. And that you transfer your recordings, your vinyl recordings to tape, and that way you could fast forward and cue it up and everything.
Are you transcribing anything right now that you want to share? That real book that you got right there?
This real book is nothing but a bunch of blank pages that I'm filling in.
Yeah.
It's a real book staff thing. Yeah, it's all I've got this is the 4th volume. I've got 3 other volumes completely filled with studies and transcriptions. So, and that's just like basically my course, core, I should say, not course, but core. I have a lot of other pages that I do for a student here or there. Pat Martino head that he wanted written out. I didn't bother to put it in there. I just wrote it and gave it to him. Stuff like that. But it's basically like a great way to document what you do. Because the thing about what I do is I don't just transcribe for myself. I document it so I can share it in a concrete form with somebody rather than just watch my hands. That person's already got skills if they're going to watch my hands and copy it. They got to know what I'm doing. Okay, you got to know it's this shape, it's this chord, whatever. You've got to already have like patterns around those fingerings. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to accomplish it. It's going to be very frustrating. So you have to have some sort of a system. People should learn the cage system, and then they should learn how to manipulate that harmonically and learn the basic colors. I mean, in jazz, there's really only a handful of scales that people use, even though there's this misconception that there's thousands of scales.
Yeah.
There's thousands of melodic permutations.
Yeah, jazz, melodic, minor.
A lot of them are still basic evergreen sounds, just like in the blues. A pentatonic, minor pentatonic, or a blues scale is still kind of the source material for blues melody.
Here's another rapid fire question. Most memorable phrase or licks from Pat Martino or Wes Montgomery?
Well, probably if I looked at Wes Montgomery, it would be like the one that he used. That would be like, let's say, let me see if I can make this happen here. If it's the one that's like you got a D minor chord, so D minor chord. So that mainly it's this kind of thing, which comes right down to that melody. That's a strong melody to me that I hear him play a lot.
Yeah.
Whether it's in a minor key, and then the Pat melody is like, let's imagine you have A minor here, 7, and then this A minor here, and that space right in there. That would be that run.
That is sweet.
Really, really definitive. Martino, to me, has the elements of the bebop scale, has the elements of the modal sound, and it has chromatic passing tones.
Yeah, that's definitely sweet.
And facilitate the movement of the melody. Because, again, the chromatic notes aren't just throwaways. They're not just what I would call obligatory or gratuitous. They are chromatic notes with a function, which is the whole point of the bebop scale, is it's going to a chord tone. And that's what makes it have a function, rather than just running your fingers down consecutively.
Yeah.
Some people play a chromatic scale that way without any thought to how it functions in the harmony. And that's what makes like a Larry Carlton or Robin Ford, or even some of the great players who have a slight but not obvious jazz influence, like Gary Moore. He had a jazz influence, but he didn't overdo it. He, when you hear him play things like, Parisian Walkways, he's putting in tasty notes that are not really from the blues scale. And sometimes there's chromaticism involved because of the chord tones, because it's kind of that progression is closer to Europa or Autumn Leaves than it is to 12-bar blues. It's a cycle, so you can put more harmonic information into it. And so what happens is when you do that, you are actually at that point transferring jazz concepts, the melody, the essence of the melodic concepts, against the harmony into more of a rock setting. And therefore, that becomes like a new way of playing it. That's the way that you would innovate. So it's like, because remember, Gary Moore was a fusion player for a couple of years in Coliseum. It was like an advanced prog rock group.
When I approach playing chromatic, I think I just use them for like maybe filler notes without any concept, or not necessarily concept, but without any idea of how they fit melodically, like we're talking about.
Within my course, there's a lot of emphasis on the bebop scale, which is the most functional way that chromaticism is used in jazz to bring out the harmony. That's how it evolved. And I have examples from Pat Martino, from Joe Pass, from John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley, and a bunch of different players who use the bebop scale differently from each other. Vincent Herring is another one that I like very much. He's a modern saxophone player. Well, not real young modern, but like way beyond Coltrane and Miles Davis. He's definitely like the next generation past that. But I transcribe a lot of his stuff. That helped me have a unique look at the harmony, because he picked notes that most guitarists wouldn't pick. And the phrases have a unique kind of construction. So I look for that, and whatever I can squeeze out of that transcription and put into my playing, even subtly, is valuable.
So anyway, let's wrap this up here. What's your definition of knowing yourself musically, and how does the mindset guide aspiring guitarists through criticism, self-doubt, or creative challenges?
Well, I have a vision that I've followed, and so being myself is trying to constantly upgrade my software in my brain with new ideas. And so that is to me one of the things that would keep me going and would allow me to have what you're describing as a path going forward. I don't know if it's awfully vague, I guess, but that's a tough question to put into concrete terms. It's always going to be a little bit in the ether, because of the choices you make along the way. Again, like I said, I never meant to get into publishing. If somebody would have told me when I was 14, 15, picking up my guitar, you know what, you're going to have a bunch of books out, you're not going to be with a band. I said, I don't want to do this. I wanted to be in a band. I wanted to be in a band that sounded like Cream or Hendrix or the Yardbirds with Jeff Beck or something, or the Beatles even, but whatever. That's what I first got into the guitar for.
Right.
But you get mature. You realize, hey, if you're going to do it for the rest of your life, you got to get more training. And so that's part of the career path. You need more experience. So that's why I sought out Herb Ellis, Joe Pass, Howard Roberts, Pat Martino, all Johnny Smith, all these players that, it's kind of interesting, because when I got with these players, I had no idea that they'd end up writing blurbs for my books. I bought Kenny Burrell album because of Mick Abrams from Jethro Tull. He was playing at the Whiskey, and we got together. We were hanging, and he said, you know, one of the things that I like is have a jazz influence. And I said, how do you get these? He says, oh, get yourself a Kenny Burrell album. So I got a Kenny Burrell album the next morning, and I started listening to it. I had no idea I was going to eventually be teaching in a university with Kenny Burrell. It's like, that's a career path. That just, you know, I used to listen to Walk On By and those great songs by Burt Bacharach, but I would never think I'm going to play with him one day in some original music, not even his own songs. So we didn't play his songs. We played brand new music. It's very different working with Burt that way. Most people who get hired by Burt get hired by a contractor, show up on a stage and play Alfie and Do You Know the Way to San Jose, and, you know, all those songs, you know, That's What Friends Are For, you know, all the big hits, whatever, you know, all the tunes that we know so well, Burt Bacharach. But he had all original music. That's why we were working on it together. He said, I want this guitar part instead of piano. So let me play you what I'm doing. It's just like was writing a song together. It was really interesting.
So awesome.
I can see why he was so successful, because he knew how to get a player that was working with him to do better. The great producers know how to make that player
get the best out of it
and not make them feel weird about it. Whereas I've worked with some producers that they're like, why can't you do this the way I want to do it? And they get to be almost like having a temper tantrum because you're just not getting it fast enough for them, or the idea is different from what they thought it would be. And that's the kind of producer I write, say that's a dividing line. There's like producers on this end, there's producers on that, and I can see why he is like that, why he had so much success, because he has that, had that element in the way he dealt with other musicians, probably because he was a musician himself. You know, he was Marlene Dietrich's music director in Paris. So, you know, he was a singer-songwriter, aspiring brill building guy. So it's a different world.
That's a very good point.
Stuffy thing. He was a player. I remember wearing a Dexter Gordon sweatshirt. He goes, I remember Dexter. I was with Marlene Dietrich and he was playing across the street.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. Sure. Do you have any advice for aspiring musicians in this day and age?
Well, yeah, wrapping up several things we talked about. Try to have your own space where you feed your own creativity. That's why I like those books. Steal Like an Artist, Music and Imagination. You'll find your own composite. Another good one is The Poetics of Music by Stravinsky. That's another great one. Music in the Carl Seashore's book, The Psychology of Music. That's another good one. Those are kind of books I read that give me inspiration. They're kind of like almost self-help with philosophy, but they deal with the art of music and creation. So I like to nurture the creative aspect. And for me, it's like, again, I have the outlet that sometimes a piece of art is what I'm going to do. So that feeds the music thing. When I come back, I have more to say on the instrument because I'm not just tunnel vision on the instrument. I would say the simplest thing you can do is if you practice real hard one day, go out, run around. I go to the beach every day for 3-mile walk every day. Come rain or come shine.
Yeah, it's healthy for the mind.
So just, you got to do that. And that's when you put on your earbuds and listen to whatever you want to listen to, or just listen to the waves, or just be around people. That's a nice break to do that. You need to do that. You can't get so tunnel vision. Although when I was 14, 15 years old, I was sitting on my bed listening to Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix and just trying to get every little piece I could, or B.B. King or whatever.
Practicing for 12 hours a day. Yeah.
But as you mature, you get past that so that you have more experience to bring to what you say, and learn that that's what you say is it matters more than what you actually know intellectually. What you could actually take to a gig and impart to people through your music is more important than all the theory in the world.
That's good advice. That's awesome, man. So anyway, I want to thank you sincerely for your time, Wolf.
You're welcome.
It's great
pleasure with you, John.